this is going to go in a little bit different direction, I think, than some of the other sessions. Yesterday, I didn't even record because I got real specific about, somebody's course. But yeah, so the idea here is just to talk about projects. And I think that what I'm actually hearing from colleagues at other institutions is that they're giving up on projects this semester because they just find it to be too complicated to deliver through the online or remote, platform. And I actually see it as the opposite. I see it as an opportunity to help students connect in a way that they're not going to connect in person. So if you put them into groups, you put them into teams, you do projects that are, and I'm thinking there could be some individual, but I'm thinking more of the group project type thing. You're giving students the opportunity to bond. So I'm encouraging my colleagues at other schools that are saying, I'm not going to do it. I was like, please do it, because your institution will benefit, the students will benefit, you'll benefit, because this is, and I've said it a few times before, this semester, if we do it bad enough, not only are students going to complain, but they're also going to sue, and they're also going to not come back. And so part of what their expectation is that they're going to have a college experience. That means meeting other students and getting to know other students and creating that network. And I don't mean romantic relationships, but they want to have relationships with other students, because that's what you get from college. When I teach my freshman courses, I always scare the bejesus out of my students, because I say, look to your left, look to your right, and some of the students that are around you may become your partners, may become your the godmother or the godfather of your children. They might become your business associates, and that just freaks them out. But it's true. I mean, how many people do we come across that they met their significant other in college, or their future business partner, or their best friend? So how do we recreate that within the online environment? I think we do that by putting students in pressure cooker situations, not in a bad way, but in a, you're forced to get something done, i.e. a project. And that's why I think they're so important. So, Ian, are you hearing faculty shy away from them, or am I off base?
I haven't heard too much either way.
So maybe it's just my colleagues. So I'm in two groups. One is a group of faculty from across the country, North America actually, that are teaching anything having to do with hotel operations. So hotel type courses. And then I'm in another group, which is all about beverage education. So anything beer, wine, etc. And in both of them, I've heard faculty say, I'm just not doing any group projects because they can't navigate Blackboard or Canvas in such a way that they see that that's going to be, easy. And they're afraid of cheating, and they're afraid. If you construct things the right way, I don't think cheating's an issue. Although I did hear just on Monday, we got the notice that we didn't renew our Turnitin at St. John's. I never used it in the first place, so it didn't bother me. Did you guys, John, did you use it?
No.
No,
I never did.
No. Ian, or is that your food here?
No, just checking.
Do you get the sense that a lot of faculty use Turnitin? Or did?
I do, yeah. At my last college, too, we used SafeAssign, which came with Blackboard, but we found Turnitin was way better, so we used that as well.
Right.
But I follow these guys, the Digital Pedagogy Lab. I don't know if you've heard of them, mm-hmm. But their philosophy, too, is using things like that. It just sends the message to students as we don't trust you. And then students start acting in a way that you're telling them you expect them to act.
Yeah, that's why I just tell everyone just to focus on personalization. If you personalize the projects enough, if you require them to put themselves into the answers and the essays and everything else, it's kind of hard. It's like the young man that says, when I was a young girl, no, that's not going to work. you're gonna figure it out. When students write a certain way, they speak a certain way, and if you're connected enough to your students, you'll pick up on the fact that they've played the copy and paste game. So
One thing I've always heard though is from computer science faculty. I don't know what you teach, John, but they have a hard time with cheating. They say it's rampant. It's not as creative as like writing an essay or doing a project, where a lot of it can be found online or copied from classmates. A lot of them know the tech game and speak. So even if they have like a live exam with their webcams, half the class says their webcam broke that week.
mm,
And I
yeah,
even hear people too, when they get hired from companies who are computer science majors, the companies will give them written exams again, just knowing how rampant it is in this field
wow.
before they hire these people.
John's in journalism.
Okay.
So I think my solution, or at least maybe partial solution for that, is doing validation. So on a regular basis, assessing them on the material, and doing things like using a GorillaPod as a secondary camera, recording themselves doing the actual work. So if they're on the computer and they're doing computer science, if they're coding, setting up a camera that's looking right at the screen, so that the professor can watch their keystrokes.
Yeah.
That to me is I learned that from Ira, dealing with, Ira Spiegel's quandary of how to do what he's trying to do. I really think that the over the shoulder camera, the screen view of a camera, of a video, can resolve that, because you can't. I mean, you can. Yeah, granted, you could do some manipulation if you had the talent, but then that's a whole other skill set. Great. But I think for easily enough, and especially right here, like I can set up 2 cameras in a matter of minutes, and you could have 2 angles at the same time. There's no reason why our students can't do it. I'm teaching a culinary course. You don't know this, Ian, actually. I'm teaching a culinary course right now, and at another institution, and I'm being very specific with them about camera angles and how to do things, and their homework every week, and I just sent it before we started, is to do what I call validations, which is they watch and watch and watch these videos on how to do certain cuts and certain things, and then they record themselves doing it using a camera angle that works, and then they upload it. So I know that it's them. Granted, it could just be their hands.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to get to know their environment. And these are students that want to learn.
Yeah.
It's anyway. But yeah, so project wise, I really think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to develop some things that are a little bit more creative. And I'm playing around with a couple of new ideas right now, specifically to get the students out and about, and to take on new clients. And so I'm finding opportunities. I just had a call this morning, a 2-hour call with one of my former students, my most successful student, as I say. She's a young lady from LaGuardia Community College back in the day, before I started teaching full-time. So it was probably 2014, 15. And she now runs a very, very successful tour business in Puerto Rico. And she has a new venture that she wanted to bounce some ideas off of me. And from my perspective, it's the fact that she had a very creative project that led her to start her business. She's the only student in 10 years that has taken me up on my offer to help her turn her final project into a real business.
Wow.
And she's been very successful. She moved her family out there, and she's done very well. She's received awards after awards from TripAdvisor.
Good work, man.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I wish there were more students that would, but I think projects, I like the idea of projects being authentic, projects that are obviously the result of learning objectives, of course, but involving real clients. That's kind of a key thing for all of my projects. And I want them all to be portfolio pieces. So these are the kinds of things that the students can take and then show to potential employers, people hiring for internships or even for promotions, which
So
is important. Yeah.
I love it.
Now it's actually, this is kind of funny. So Ian clued me, we had a brief conversation about the badges that John, did you receive your badge, John?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, you might have, but there's these digital badges that St. John's in a couple of departments, they provide these badges. And last week we talked about this idea of creating badges for our courses.
Oh yeah.
This is coming full circle. So I'm going to actually be doing badges for my culinary course. So for every skill set that they lock into, I'm going to give them a badge that I create. And it's just a simple little graphic that I've created. And I created a dummy one for John. Basically any student of John's who finds a mistake in a big publishing giant, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Tribune, whatever, that they get a badge for that particular publication when they find it and they correct it, I guess.
John, my mom would get a bunch of badges. She finds like 3 in Newsday on Long Island every day. Grammar errors.
Well, I require my students to read the Times every day, and I require them to find only one error, lapse, or if there's some week if they run dry, I allow them to find an editing triumph, which could be actually harder. But then they post these things and they say it's in this paragraph in this sentence, but they don't say what it is, and then everybody else has to try to figure out what the other student found. So instead of just one a week, we got 14 of them a week.
Oh wow!
And they said, today the students, we had class this morning, and one of the students said, I don't know about this schedule. We post these things on Friday, and we reply on Saturday, and then we circle back on Sunday. I said, well, okay, what do you want? You want it spread out? Yeah. So put a day in there, because I want an extra day to circle back, and that includes revealing. That's also the reveal of what they actually found. So it's a little more complicated than just bringing a clipping into the classroom and say, here. And it's one of the little lagniappes of remote learning, that we can think up stuff like that. And then of course Damien's got his badges, and he'll probably have me give him caps or maybe gowns.
Why not? Why not a shawl?
Caps and gowns. I heard of that before.
Ferraris.
Yeah, Ferraris.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Maybe, well, you can say this is the Ferrari of the course.
Of badges.
Yeah, the Ferrari of badges.
Jeez, I don't know.
So
but you digress.
No. It's great, because it brings us back to I think that part of the project conversation is how do you there's the pedagogy side, but there's also the technical side. How do you bend Blackboard or Canvas, bend it to your will in terms of what you're trying to do. And I think, if we're looking at group projects, if we're looking at projects from a group perspective or a team perspective, I think one of the nice initial pieces, which I think is important, is utilizing the discussion board and breaking up those students into individual discussion boards so that they can talk amongst themselves and to map things out. And you can require that of them to say, within your discussion board, you're going to do these 4 things. You're going to identify the captain. You're going to identify roles and responsibilities. You're going to identify timeline. And then you're going to identify the person who's going to clean up the whole thing so that it's consistent and has the same voice, throughout it. And then that's just riffing on the idea of a project. It could be any project. And I think by doing it within the discussion board, and both Canvas and Blackboard have their iterations of that, you can see the process. You can see the process and the progress within the team or the group, which I think is important. And then you can pick up on whether or not students are lagging, or if they're putting it all on one person, or there's somebody that's just not engaged in some way, shape, or fashion, which I think is a lot of the issue that our colleagues have with the online version of a project, is that they think it's harder for students to engage, or they think it creates more havoc. But I don't think it has to. And a lot of, basically the discussion board and the actual final piece that they put together are the only two things that I give a group grade to. Everything else I make individual. So all the pieces that they're responsible for, I make it individual, because then you don't have the headaches that come with every team project, which is, okay, how much did Ian actually do? How much did John actually do? How much did Jen actually do? Because then you're having to deal with personalities and lies and or stretching of the truth. And whereas you could just make it an individual project, and the student earns what they earn because they either did it or they didn't do it, or they did it partially, and you have a rubric for that. So I think it's a sandwich. So I look at projects, especially within online. And again, my background, I use the LMS for all of my courses, whether they're face-to-face, hybrid, remote, or fully asynchronous. So my approach is always the same. It's that sandwich most of the time, that the discussion board is a team grade, the final piece is a team grade. But I also don't put, that's not 50% of the group project grade is the final piece. It's maybe 10%. The 80% in the middle, so 10% for the discussion, 10% for the final piece, the 80% in the middle in terms of work is individual assignments. It's, this student has to submit this piece, or this student has to do this piece, and this is the interaction with the client, and that way they're all on the same page, and you're not trying to referee work that's not being done. How does that feel for you both? John?
Very interesting. The closest thing that I've come to this, and this was very satisfying, was at Hofstra. I taught for a couple of semesters, I taught a magazine production course. Mm-hmm. And on the final day of the final class period, a printer delivered bales of finished slick magazines to the class to distribute around the campus. And I had to pick a managing editor out of the class, and then the managing editor picked, along with me, the rest of the staff. And so you had a complete staff, everybody had assignments, and you ran it just like it was a real magazine, because at the end of you can't be the first class in the history of Hofstra that didn't produce a magazine. Where's your magazine? And so everybody had to do their job. And that was, in terms of assessment, that class was the only one where I ever knew that I was going to give somebody a default C, at best. And that's the one student that I got an email from after the grades were turned in, and I never even opened the email. I mean, because I knew what it was going to say. But they say at the Courier Journal, there was a guy from Western Kentucky named Jack Sellers, who ended up being the PR guy for Capitol Records. But on the way, he went through the Courier Journal newsroom, and Jack used to say, everyone in the newsroom is naked. everybody in the newsroom is naked because you know what everybody else is doing or not doing.
Right.
And so when you have a group, that's what you have, or you may have several groups, but in this case of the magazine, it was one group. And we knew every week who was doing their part and who wasn't.
Right.
And so I think that's interesting. I think it was interesting to me how you do a project. There's certain classes where you can do a project and certain classes where you can't. I'm not sure I haven't figured out what the copy editing projects might be.
Right.
know.
Well, and I like your distinction or your spotlight on this idea of, there's two ways to look at the projects. You can look at it as different teams within the course. I have 40 students in my marketing class, so I can break that up into 8 different teams of 5 versus having the class be one big project with individual roles and individual responsibilities. And I've done both. I've had really small classes where you really have to do the entire class as one team because there's just not enough, there's not enough roles to go around, kind of thing.
Yeah.
My culinary course is 4 students, and so when we do our 2 projects, they are going to be all hands on deck. And I'll share with you what I'm doing just for fun. But there's
Top Chef Challenge.
No. I mean, I appreciate what that is all about, but I think it's a little overdone, and it's not very original. But it's still great. Like doing the mystery basket and having them come up with stuff. Yeah, that's always fun. And I think in a different environment, I would probably do something along those lines. But I'm doing something very simple because I also have to I think this is a big part of any course and certainly projects. You need to gauge what the students are capable of doing and not overreaching in terms of what your expectations are. So if there's a standard, going back to your example, John, if there's a standard for producing a magazine each course, that is the standard, and that's what the students expect. That's what the tradition is. The course is built to do that. The relationship with the publisher is there. Then great, you can do that. But in a English 101, if you said that was the course project, how many students would drop, freak out? The list goes on because it's just so beyond where they are.
Absolutely.
So, getting back to your example, Ian, the Top Chef Challenge, that's great. But this is a culinary 1 course. These are 3 out of the 4 are fairly new to the game. 1 happens to own a restaurant, which is fun in itself. So instead, I'm just doing something that I've learned from or picked up on over the last few months in COVID era. These videos that you see on LinkedIn where somebody throws a ball and then on the other side somebody catches it in a different screen. I think MSG did a really good one, which I remember, and they just kept throwing balls and people would catch the ball and then throw the ball. It's a relay. So it's a video relay, and I'm doing it with eggs. And so I'm going to have the students take a team approach to making different egg, breakfast type things. And to create the video, they're going to throw eggs to each other as part of that process. That's going to be the only team part is really the throwing of the eggs. And then I'm going to put the videos together and then I'm going to send it out to everybody. So it's simple, relatively. Part of it, actually, one of the big things that I picked up on over the last couple of weeks is how easy it is on your phone to record and upload to YouTube. It's, there's 2 things that we've discovered over the last, 6 weeks. One is that you can record directly onto Canvas, which is so easy. Oh, very, very easy. And I love that. Blackboard, no, not so much. But to make that easier, to fill that gap with Blackboard, I'm requiring all my students in the culinary course to record via YouTube because it's just a one button thing. We talk about the one button studio at St. John's. Well, guess what? YouTube has it. So click, record, and then they just post the link, and it's that simple. So any reactions to some of the things that I've shared, Ian?
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. I love how you spend more time grading the individual work than the group work, the final product. Actually, that's really interesting. I love to dive deeper into that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you provide a rubric for the individual work? Do they each have their different roles? So there's a rubric for each role?
I treat them as individual assignments. So as I look at let's say it's the group project. So it'd be GP1, GP2, GP3, GP4, GP5, GP6. GP1 would be the discussion board that they all utilize and they're sharing their information on. And that in itself would be a team grade. And then GP2 through GP4 would all be individual pieces that they each have to do. So if it's 5 students in the team, they each individually have to do it. And frankly, everybody else in the course is doing it. So they're turning in their individual work. So maybe they have to do a facade review of a restaurant. So they have to go and look at the facade and see how their awning is and their signage is and payment information on the door. And they have to evaluate all that. And that would be one assignment that they submit. And then, a few more assignments later, they're communicating within the discussion board. And the concept is that they have to pull all of that information together into one cohesive packet that then they submit to obviously me, but also turn back to the client. And so as a team, they have a rubric, but all the other assignments are just regular individual assignments. They're just being done for a group project. Does that make sense?
It does, and I love how you break it down like that, because I feel like every group project has individual components, mm-hmm. but each component might not be turned in to the instructor, right? It's turned into the group, and if somebody's missing one of their parts, the group is just going to make it up and get it done somehow, and that information doesn't get passed on to the instructor.
Right.
So I just love that little aspect, yeah.
Yeah, and I do reserve sometimes I'll build it in, sometimes I won't, but I might build in something into like the next quiz or exam after that, which will have a little section, talk about your group project experience, because that's communication between just the student and myself. And that's that reflective piece of saying, this is where it worked, this is where it didn't, so it's kind of a gimme in terms of a section of the quiz or the test, but it gives you that feedback on how it worked and whether or not things need to be tweaked or not. In some cases, if things were really a little off, I would build in a piece where the students would give me feedback about their teammates. But I think if you make it individual, you're clearing a lot of that stuff out, because you're giving fewer opportunities for students to skate and to be lazy and whatever else.
Well, based on your numbers, even if they do skate, they could still just get a 20% as their highest grade.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's also, I think, authentic in the sense that, in the quote unquote real world, yes, you have pieces that are the team obviously has to accomplish a goal, but individuals have real responsibilities. Like John was saying, in the newsroom, they're naked. So everybody knows if Samantha has fallen short on her responsibilities, because everybody else is depending on her to do that part of it. If she doesn't do the fact checking, then there's going to be a miss, and the article can't run. If that part was not done, then the assembly line doesn't work. Somebody forgot to put the caps on the bottles. Yeah, that's kind of a problem.
Yeah, I've been on projects though where the person doesn't hold up their end, or they do a mediocre or less than mediocre effort. So like John's example, not fact checking, and they're ready to run the story. And I could be like, okay, we need to get this out. I want to get an article out this week. Or I could say, no, I'm going to fact check it myself. just to make sure I don't look foolish. So
Yeah.
I've done that before, and my boss has never known.
Oof.
You know, maybe
Yeah.
they could check in more to know. That could be on the boss, but I'm not gonna, turn somebody in. I feel like that puts me in a weird position.
Yeah, I know, and it's tricky actually, but that in itself creates a good conversation with the students, depending on the discipline, to say these things are going to happen, and how do you handle that conflict resolution? How do you deal with that if something gets produced and it's less than what it could have been? Whose responsibility is it? And it's that interdependence conversation that exists. The one of the projects that we that's being marinating with John is this thing that I semi proposed, which was to create was it the rats? What are they called? The what are the different roles?
Oh, rim rats.
Rim rats, the rim rats. So basically, doing a team thing where students have individual roles and they have to play their part over a couple of weeks, where this piece comes in, it has to go bounce from this person to this person to this person. But there are checks and balances where there's the chief who will kick it back to somebody if it's not up to snuff, quality control, so to speak. So I think that's also a nice part. Maybe that should exist in more projects, is somebody that's responsible for quality control, and it could be to some extent the responsibility of the person who is the captain, or the person who has to bring the whole packet together. I hate getting a packet that is, Times New Roman, then Arial, then Garamond, and it's like, did you guys even think about making this a lot cleaner?
So I love that idea about having somebody be that that quality assurance person, because just people love to point at errors, right? Oh, you did that wrong. You could have done that better. And I wonder if there's some kind of way to anonymously have each student in the group turn it in, so they don't feel like, oh man, I'm bashing my friend Tim. I don't want to really bash him in front of the teacher, so
Right.
you wouldn't know.
Well, yeah, I think there's a way to do it. I was thinking specifically within the LMS. I think you can do anonymous. I think there's an anonymous piece. Or you do it in the way where you have that one individual who is the person that pulls the whole packet together, and you could make it part of the responsibility, where you say, okay, this is the point where you send all of that information to that person, and only that person, and you do it as a confidential thing, which will be an interesting conversation of whether or not they actually keep it confidential, because it's low stakes. It's like, oh no, John said that I misspelled something. I'm not going to hate him for that, but pointing out things and just saying the product is better if we have these controls. I mean, I think there's something there from an authentic experience perspective for the project. And it leads to a conversation in the course, and maybe it's a recording that you put out afterwards, and you say, look, you all went through this experience. Here's some of the things that I've heard from you all about what you learned. And that could come out of the mini quiz that you send afterwards in terms of a reflection piece. What are the stakes? What if this project was a real project and you did some of the same things that you did in this assignment, in this project in the class? What could have happened? And you could have this basically one-way conversation with the students to say, would somebody have been fired? Would the product have succeeded? If the bottles were delivered without caps on, or if the labels were cockeyed, would they have sold? Would the company have faltered because one person from the team didn't do their job? And so that becomes a bigger conversation, and that's why quality control is so important. And depending on the discipline, right now I don't know if you've heard about this podcast, but there's a podcast called Dr. Death, Have you heard about this one? It's about
Oh.
this, it's on the Wondery network. So I think it's a 6-part series. We've listened to 4 of them, and it's all about this doctor and he's a neurosurgeon, and how he was trained at these different places, Tennessee and then Baylor, and how he just went around and started just destroying people, like in the operating room. It's scary. And what it really, a lot of what's coming out of it for me is, how did people not catch the fact that he was nuts? How did people not stop him, not report him, not hold him account, like all these things, so that quality.
No brainer.
Yeah, exactly right. But there's, you would think, but I mean, people died, you know, and
Yeah.
and it could have been stopped right at the beginning, but
Mm.
you know, because of bureaucracy, because of politics, because of, you know, reputation management, these things
Well,
happen. So is that your food, Ian?
I don't see a car, but hang on, let me just grab it. Give me 1 second.
Okay. But yeah, I highly recommend that podcast. It's very, very interesting. But I think we can build that quality assurance into projects. Yours is actually, your discipline is great for this, John, because of the, you know, the rim rats and the chief,
Yeah,
the
sure.
editor and everybody, because that is one of the oldest examples of quality assurance out of any industry is journalism.
Yeah, you know, there were a couple. Let's see. The one thought was there was another favorite course of mine at St. John's was called the Practicum, and it was it operated like a newsroom, and I was the managing editor, and so when we had the first class, instead of introductions, I said, these are job interviews, and I know you paid your tuition, but you have to tell me why you deserve to be on the staff. We're calling this the practicum phantom. You know, we assign and decide on stories every week, but we don't actually publish a paper. Maybe you'll turn your story into the student newspaper and see if they'll pitch it, see if they'll buy it. But one of the things that you do when you impose something that replicates reality, then you can say this is your job,
Right.
and you know you have to come. You can't skip class. What if you just didn't show up at the New York Times newsroom? How many times would you do that? And what would happen to you? Well, I'd be fired. That's right. And I said, I'm going to fire you. I'm going to try. The provost may intercede, but you know, if you don't come here and you don't write your story, are you going to create a blank space in the New York Times? How many times can you do that? What if you're late to work?
Right.
3 times. Well, you know. Anyway, so you can impose. I don't know. It seemed that this fit when I started in explaining it, but I'm not sure that it does.
No, it does. It does. And I think that there's also the opportunity to have the conversation about redundancies. And so, you know, you have to assume, if you're running a newspaper, you have to assume that things are going to happen sometimes to your team. And if you depend on one person and only one person to do a certain job, it's probably not good management or leadership, because what if they get sick? What if they have a death in the family? What if, you know, they disappear? And so I think you can build that in a little bit in terms of having teams where some people can overlap, you know, so the person that, you know, I'm going to talk from a marketing perspective, the person that's doing direct mail also knows a little something about billboards and posters. So they can, you know, if that billboards and posters person disappears, they can fill in. And so that the, you know, the end result is still what it needs to be, but those
Sure.
redundancies are good.
Sure.
I think another good example for that is theater. You know, they always have the main characters. Yeah, you have the understudies that are in the wings just in case. And same thing in sports. You know, if you have how many running backs? You have, you know, a stable of 5, 6 running backs, and that's just the starters out of the 53 person, you know, roster, not including the practice squad. You know, and so you're designing your team for maximum efficiency, but you're proactive. And I think that the idea of being proactive is a great lesson within projects as well. Anticipate that things are going to go wrong and have things in place. You know, and that's a good question, again, maybe from a reflection perspective after the project, which is to say, you know, what are some things that you could have anticipated a little bit better, you know, in terms of this particular project? Or, you know, in terms of running the newspaper, what are some things that you learned about the different roles and how important they are and how you can back up certain roles with different people? You know, it might be interesting to see what the students think about from that perspective.
Yeah.
What was funny is on my call earlier with the student who's the tour operator, she pulled out her press release that she did that we worked on together in 2016. She just had it because it was something that she's going to use as the model for a new press release that I suggested that she create now for some of the new products that she's coming out with. But I think there's a lot of, you know, you have the project and there's all these other things, these side benefits from the project, which are to have conversations about ethics, about redundancy, about actual products, making connections to real industries. You know, the quality assurance piece, I think, is huge. I don't know if you caught this, Ian, while you stepped out for a moment, but journalism is probably the best example of quality assurance out of any discipline because of the how important it is to get the stuff right. Because if you don't get it right, you get sued potentially. You look like an idiot, you know, professionally. And we talked about this before, and I still can't remember the movie, but there is this moment where they printed the wrong thing, and they edited the quote in such a way that it made the story invalid. And so there's all these little details that if you don't have the right people in place, and it was a junior copywriter that didn't know, like, you know, a few months on the job, they didn't know what they were doing, it can have dire consequences. You know, you can always refer, you know, there's joke examples, but you know, when Chevy came out with the Nova and they wondered why it didn't sell in Mexico, Nova does not go. Why would you buy a car that doesn't go? You know, so, you know, you have to have that quality assurance. You have to have people checking the legality, checking the ethics, checking, you know, the international side of things. You know, Nike produced, I think it was Nike produced those shoes with the symbol on the back, not realizing the symbol meant something to certain cultures. Oops. Actually, a recent one involving my fraternity, Ralph Lauren designed a pair of pants, and they sold it in Europe, and it had our fraternity letters on the pants, and it became a big legal to-do. It actually turned out to be a good thing because it's turning into internship opportunities for our members, but still, there's that quality assurance is so important. But I think you can build that into the project process in terms of picking certain, you know, teams. And I love the idea of, you know, approaching it from a hiring perspective. I've done that in the past with my event planning classes, but I've never gone the route of interviewing them. And I'm wondering how I can do that with a class of 40 students. But I am certainly going to do jobs. I'm going to have different jobs for different students for the final project. that they're going to work on together. So we'll see how that goes. Anywho, any other reactions, John or Ian, before we wrap?
Well, the dynamics are very interesting, and I'm going to probably listen to this one again. I've got,
you got your notes.
You got, it's yeah.
No, that's good.
Very. Every class is helpful in one way or another, and I appreciate that.
Good. Ian?
Yeah, I just got some final thoughts. So we just did a large enrollment online class workshop, and I actually had the component, we broke it up with our team, and I did the component on group work. So like one idea I had, similar to what you're doing with individuals turning in work, was almost what we do in our department, where we have a project management sheet that we update regularly. So I thought about groups doing that kind of a work, and also like a weekly reflection. So if you have a huge class, you could almost dive in to see the group reflection, individuals like weekly reflections, where they're at their project, how things are going. And some of the research also talked about having discussions with the class, have them even do a reading or a discussion about what it's like to work as a group. Right? Like communicating, constructive criticism, accepting criticism. What is it like when the whole group votes down your idea? Like not everybody takes that well, but that's going to happen to every one of us in life. So let's read about how to handle that, right? Freshmen need to learn these skills. And even assigning groups the idea of they have to submit a strategy, right? I read this, we talked about it as a group, and here's our strategy when we hit a wall or when something comes up. I really love those ideas.
No, that's good. And you reminded me of a couple things, which is one is just asking the question to students, why is it important that we do group work in the first place? Because very often they just think it's professors giving them work. They don't realize that it's a fundamental part of what we teach in higher ed, which is, in so many courses, group work is there because ultimately when they graduate, the idea is that they're going to be working with other people that are different from them. And if they don't know how to work with other people, it's gonna limit their ability to grow as individuals and as professionals.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing that I was going to ask is, the project management, are you introducing at any point to things like Asana or Trello or some of those platforms?
Not really, no.
But it's fine as long as they're introduced to the concept. We can throw in there. The companies use the same approaches. They just use some tools, some platforms to help them with that. And here are some examples, so that they know that it's not just. I think some students think that some of the stuff we give them is limited to just the college and university environment, and that they're not going to use it ever again. But I think it helps every so often to remind them, we're giving you a glimpse into what you're going to experience when you leave this place. And even though we're simplifying it perhaps in terms of an 8.5 by 11 project management, worksheet, this is the basis from which all this software, is. We used to write on paper, now we write on docs. We used to just do this, now we use Excel. There's always a continuum. So.
Yeah, true, man. True.
That's
well,
good.
thanks.
And the other thing is milestones. I don't think we use milestones enough in terms of group projects. These are the things that we're trying to do, and you create this line of, this is where we are and this is where we want to get to, and all the things that need to happen in the meantime, and hitting those marks. And publishing, if you don't do things in a certain sequence and by a certain time, then you're not going to print on time, right? Yeah. So I think that's good. This has been good. It's been good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, I will see you perhaps at a future one. John, I know I will see you.
Yeah, I'll be back at 5 or something like that.
Yeah, that's the next one. I'm gonna carve out some time, probably upload some of these to the website. But yeah, it's been good. All right,
Thanks,
gentlemen.
guys. Appreciate it. Have a good
Thanks.
day.
Good to
Take
meet you,
care.
Ian.
You too, John.
Damien.
All right, bye, guys.
Bye.